Alright, man, we back. Goku and DC Season 4, Episode 18. In this episode, man, Beast Boy gets his revenge. I thought this thumbnail was going to look hard, but it probably won't get no traction on YouTube because it's got blood in it and they got a whole thing about that. Anyway, shout out to the members, man. Right before we get into this, shout out to the members. Jason57835, John Lane 2016, OD Demon Wolf 34, and Quad A Moat, man. Shout out to y'all, man. Y'all help me make better and better things for the channel, man. You know, putting whenever some bread behind it. So I appreciate that. Shout out to the subscribers as well. Anyways, man, without further ado, let's get into it. The crimson light of the Hell Dimension cast long twisted shadows across the ruined plaza. Beast Boy stood like a statue carved in vengeance, his emerald eyes fixed on Deathstroke with an intensity that seemed to burn away the surrounding chaos that was around them all. 20 yards separated them, a charged gulf of broken asphalt and silent promises of pain. A low feral growl rumbled in Beast Boy's chest, a sound that had nothing to do with any earthly animal. Slade spoke up. "I'm glad you came back." Or Beast Boy spoke up. "I'm glad you came back, Slade," he said, his voice a gravelly scrape of pure, undiluted hate. It carried across the distance, sharp and cold, because this time, I get to be the one who sends you to hell. Permanently. Deathstroke didn't flinch at these words. He simply tilted his head. The single crimson lens of his helmet whirring faintly as it focused. From behind the expressionless mask came a dry, humorless chuckle. A sound like a grinding stone. "Look at you," he mused, his tone dripping with mock pity. "All grown up. And feral. The little green cubs finally got some teeth." He took a single deliberate step forward. His armored boots crunching on debris. "You look rabid, boy, foaming at the mouth with rage. Don't worry," he continued, his voice dropping to a sinister, almost soothing purr. "It's a kindness, really. I'll put you down, out of your misery. Consider it cleaning up the Titan's last failed experiment that couldn't even make the cut." The words hung in the toxic air. Beast Boy's response was not a shout, but a slow, terrifying smile that didn't reach his eyes. The ground trembled as Beast Boy's form exploded in a flash of green energy, morphing into a hulking, emerald-scaled triceratops with a bellow that shook dust from the ruins. He lowered his three-horned head and charged, a living battering ram of primal fury. Debris scattered under his thunderous footfalls. The charge aimed to impale and pulverize. Deathstroke didn't dodge. He simply braced, his enhanced cybernetics whirring as he calculated the trajectory and force. At the last possible second, his hands shot forward, not to avoid the horns, but to meet them. With a deafening clang of metal and hardened bone, his gauntlets clamped around the two larger horns. Servos in his arms screamed in protest, but held. His boots dug twin trenches in the asphalt as the massive momentum of the charge was arrested, bringing the several-ton beast to a shuddering, skidding halt, mere inches from his own chest. Dust swirled around the looking tableau. The raging, snorting beast and the unmoving armored man from behind his mask. Slade's voice emerged, cool and dripping with condescension. "Is that all your borrowed strength amounts to?" he mocked, his grip iron tight. "Time to teach you the laws of the ancient text, boy. It's a fundamental truth, really. Man was given dominion over the beasts." He applied pressure, not to throw the Triceratops, but to hold it utterly still, demonstrating complete control. Horns, teeth, and claws. There are tools for the simple, practically mindless and predictable. True power is mind over matter. It's calculation over instinct. And I, he growled, leaning into the beast's straining head, am the pinnacle of that dominion. For a moment, Deathstroke held the immense struggling form, a testament to his upgraded strength and control that was given to him by man's intelligence. And the calculus was perfect. Contain the beast, demonstrate superiority, break its spirit. The Triceratops' emerald eye, filled with fury, was locked with his impassive crimson lens. But then, The equation changed. In a flash of green light so sudden it left an afterimage, the massive dinosaur vanished. There was no gradual shift. One instant, Slade was grappling a ton of reptilian muscle. The next, his hands closed on empty air as the form before him collapsed in on itself and re-expanded with terrifying speed. Standing where the Triceratops had been was a creature of nightmares, one of Piccolo's hellspawn, perfectly replicated in verdant green. It was a wiry bipedal horror with skin like knotted bark and arms that ended not in hands, but in long serrated bone blades. Before Slade's predictive algorithms could even register the new threat profile, the creature moved. It wasn't a brute force charge, it was fluid, a demonic pivot. One bladed arm came up in a vicious upward slash, aimed at the seam of Slade's chest plate. The alloy, engineered to withstand energy fire and blunt force, screeched in protest against the chitinous edge. Shink! A shower of sparks erupted as the blade carved a deep, jagged rent across Slade's torso armor. It wasn't just a scratch, it was a thin breach, exposing a little bit of glowing circuitry and synthetic muscle beneath. The force of the blow, combined with his own forward momentum now meeting no resistance, sent Slade stumbling backward. He caught himself, after several yards, a rare spark of actual surprise disrupting the cold data stream in his mind. His hand went to the smoking gash in his armor, fingers coming away with not blood, but leaking hydraulic fluid and coolant. His single lens focused on the bladed demon form, which now stood poised, his head tilted in a mockery of his own early gesture. Beast Boy's voice distorted in multi-layered hiss from the creature's maw. "You like to collect data, Slade. Here's an inventory for your files." He flexed his blade arms, the edge gleaming in the hell light. "The beast has evolved." Slade's singular visible eye narrowed to a crimson slit behind enhanced optical vision. The dry analytical humor was gone and replaced by a cold, focused intensity. With a smooth, lethal hiss, he drew one of his swords from its back-mounted sheath. The polished alloy gleamed dully in the bloody light, a stark contrast to the organic serrated bone blades of his foe. "I see you've added to your repertoire," Slade acknowledged, his voice a low, dangerous monotone. He gave the bladed arms a slow, appraising look as if cataloging their reach and potential cutting angles. "A demon's tools for a feral boy who thinks he's a man now. But remember this, boy. A weapon is only as good as the mind that wields it." He settled into a classic, immaculate stance, blade held steady before him. Instinct versus centuries of refined technique. "Let's see which cuts deeper." He didn't wait for a reply. With a burst from his boot thrusters, he became a streak of black and orange. Beast Boy in his demonic form snarled and met the charge. The ruined plaza erupted into a whirlwind of clashing steel and chitin. It was brutal. Discordant symphony. Slade's strikers were geometric and efficient. Precise thrusts aimed at joints. Lightning-fast feints followed by slashes for the neck or the back of the knees. Beast Boy was a chaos incarnate. He fought with feral, adaptive style, his bladed arms whirling in unpredictable arcs, using his shapeshifter's agility to contort away from killing blows and launch savage counters from impossible angles. Sparks flew every time a sword met bone blade. Shing! Crack! Of the impact echoing through the chaos. Slade was technically superior, a master of the blade, but he was now facing an opponent whose very form was the weapon itself, and whose fighting style defied all conventional patterns. The calculus of combat had just become infinitely more complex to the observer. Then Slade saw it. A split-second opening, born of overcommitment. Beast Boy's demonic form, for all its savage power, had locked both its bladed arms against Slade's primary sword in a contest of raw strength. The green creature's torso was exposed, its neck a vulnerable line of corded muscle. With a motion as smooth and inevitable as a guillotine's fall, Slade's left hand raised to his shoulder. There was no flourish, no wasted motion. The second sword emerged from its sheath with a sound like a sharp, cold sigh. Its polished edge, already painted with the hellish crimson of the sky, became a blur of lethal light. It was going to be a perfect cut, a horizontal arc aimed to separate head from shoulders. It wasn't just fast, it was economical. Every ounce of Slade's enhanced strength, every calculation of his trigon-augmented processor was behind it. It travailed. It traveled the minimal distance necessary, its path unerring. Beast Boy's emerald eyes widened, the feral snarl freezing on his bestial face. In that crystalline moment, he knew. His arms were pinned and his momentum was forward, and his shape-shifting reflexes, though swift, weren't going to be fast enough. This was a kill shot born of cold, premeditated geometry, and it was arriving faster than any instinct could even counter. The blade sang through the tainted air, a whisper of finality. It was a checkmate written in steel. Slade's single unblinking lens reflected the imminent decapitation. Not with triumph, but with the serene satisfaction of a complex equation finally solved. The beast, for all its new tricks, had been outmaneuvered, and this dance was about to be over. The sword's arc was perfection. A cold, silver line cutting through the corrupted air aimed to end the fight with brutal finality. Beast Boy's emerald eyes could only track its approach, his shapeshifter's instinct screaming but offering no escape from the geometry of death. An inch from his neck, the world dissolved into a scream of wind and light. Not Slade's strike, but a familiar, impossible velocity. A crimson and gold blur moving not at its universe-defying top speed, but with agonized, desperate purpose, tore into the space between them. It was Barry, the Flash, his costume still torn and fresh blood streaking his side from the earlier sonic assault, his face a mask of pain determination. He shouldn't have been able to stand, let alone run, but the sight of a teammate about to die had ignited something deeper than pain. Alright. He moved in a lurching, sparkling burst of speed force, his hand trembling with strain. He didn't punch or block. He simply snatched. He hooked Beast Boy around the waist. The momentum wrenched from Slade's killing geometry. The sword completed its swing with a devastating but it sliced through empty air and the lingering afterimage of speed, severing only dust motes and hellish light. Slade's blade quivered in the sudden void, his flawless strike meeting no resistance. He stood perfectly still, his single crimson lens whirring as it refocused on the new tableau. 20 feet away, the blur resolved. Barry skidded to a knee, one arm wrapped around a stun-shifting Beast Boy, the other braced against the ground. He was panting raggedly, every line of his body telegraphing the tremendous cost of that single saving sprint. Smoke curled from tears in his suit where stressed fabric had met friction. Slade slowly lowered his sword, the dry chuckle returning, laced with fresh, analytical contempt. Ah, the wounded runner. He saves his pet, he observed. Sentiment. The ultimate flaw in your design. He gestured with his blade toward Barry's bleeding side. You better hope you can outrun your blood loss, Barry. The crimson blade sang through empty air, and Slade stood motionless for a single calculating beat, the perfect geometry of his kill shot now a wasted line in space. His lens tracked the two heroes 20 feet away, the Flash gasping on one knee and Beast Boy shimmering back to his human form in the circle of Barry's arm. A dry analytical sound like grinding gears issued from his helmet. I have to admit, Flash, that was an impressive Slade conceded, his tone devoid of any real admiration. A truly impressive burst of velocity, given your compromised state. He tilted his head, the crimson light glinting off his scarred mask. If only your green friend here possessed a fraction of that speed. He let the statement hang, a predator allowing the poison to seep in. He might have been fast enough to save Terra. The word struck with the force of a physical blow. Beast Boy's breath hitched. The chaotic fury that drove him evaporated, replaced by cold, silent void. And then a seismic tremor of pure, unadulterated rage. Barry felt the shift and saw the green skin darken, the eyes bleed from emerald to a hellish pharaoh yellow. Gar, don't. Barry's warning was a raw whisper. It was too late. A guttural, non-human-like roar tore from Beast Boy's throat, a sound of such profound anguish and fury it shook the rubble. Green energy exploded outward, not in a controlled shift, but in a violent eruption. He didn't assume a form. He became a storm of bestial rage blitzing towards Slade with speed born of utter soul-crushing hatred. Strategy was forgotten. There was only the source of the pain and the need to rend it into pieces. The plaza became a whirlwind of emerald fury. The plaza became a whirlwind of emerald fury. Beast Boy didn't settle into a single form. He became a storm of them all. He lunged as a raptor, jaw snapping for Slade's thigh, only to vanish mid-leap and reappear as a prehistoric scorpion the size of a horse, with a venomous stinger whipping toward the mercenary's back. And when the attack was parried, the scorpion dissolved into a hulking crocodile, snapping at Deathstroke's head. It was unpredictable, disorienting assault, a shapeshifter's rage given form, and for a few crucial seconds, it worked. Slade's processor stuttered, struggling to chart a predictive path through a foe who redefined himself every half second. A bladed arm, copied from a spawn, scored a shallow groove across Slade's pauldron, and then grazed his side armor. But Deathstroke wasn't just reacting, he was adapting. His cybernetic eye began to track not the form, but the energy signature, the millisecond flare of green light that preceded each change. He started to anticipate the rhythm of chaos. As Beast Boy shifted back to human form for a split second to reorient, Slade saw the opening. He stepped inside his fading momentum and pivoted, his armored boot driving forward in a devastating front kick that caught Beast Boy squarely in the chest just as his human form solidified. Boom. The air left Beast Boy's lungs in a pained gasp. The force of the blow, amplified by Slade's enhanced strength, lifted him off his feet and sent him hurtling backward. He crashed through the skeletal remains of a street lamp and skidded across the broken asphalt, coming to a stop in a heap. The chaotic storm of his rage momentarily knocked out of him. Slade stood amidst the settling dust, not even winded, his blade held loosely at his side. A master who had weathered the storm and found its eye. The plaza fell into an eerie stillness, broken only by the crackle of distant fires and Beast Boy's ragged, pained gasp. From where he lay, Deathstroke stood some yards away, a monument of cold efficiency amidst the ruin. He gave one of his swords a slow, casual twirl, the blade catching the hellish light in a hypnotic silver arc. "Well," Slade's voice cut through the quiet, that same dry, analytical tone devoid of any real emotion. "This has been instructive. A fascinating study in feral aggression. But sentiment and rage are poor fuel for a prolonged fight. They burn hot and then they sputter out." He ceased to twirl, bringing the sword point down to rest lightly on the rubble, pointing in Beast Boy's direction. "You came here for a reunion, boy. A chance to rewrite the past." He shook his head slowly, the crimson lens unwavering. "But some histories only have one ending. And this little tantrum of yours is over. It's time to close the book on the Titans' dropout for good." Beast Boy pushed himself up on trembling arms, every breath of fire in his chest. Through the haze of pain and fury, his mind, the part that was still Garfield Logan, Titan friend, clicked into focus. He'd been fighting like an animal, and Slade had dissected him for it. But he wasn't just a beast. He was a strategist forged in 100 battles with a team when he was a hero. He just had to remember how to think like one. Across the rubble, Barry was staggering to his feet, one hand clutching his bleeding side. Their eyes met each other. Beast Boy gave a sharp, almost imperceptible jerk of his chin towards Slade, who was advancing with lethal calm, then using a series of subtle hand gestures they developed years ago. On missions, a quick tap to his own temple, a flick of two fingers towards Slade's back, a clenched fist. He signaled a crude, desperate plan. Barry's eyes widened in understanding, then narrowed with resolve. He gave a single pained nod. "Gotta get close," Beast Boy rasped, just loud enough for Barry to hear. "Inside his guard. When I give the signal, you light him up, and don't hold back." He didn't wait for confirmation. With a roar that was more defiance than rage this time, Beast Boy charged, not in a wild blur, but in a direct head-on sprint. The plaza's eerie silence shattered as Beast Boy erupted into motion. But this time, the charge wasn't a mindless fury of shifting forms. It was a focused gambit. His body morphed in mid-stride, taking on the wiry bladed arm demonic form that he'd copied from Piccolo's spine. He didn't zigzag or feint. He powered forward into a straight, powerful line, using the creature's strong legs to build explosive momentum. Deathstroke's lens tracked a predictable trajectory, a sight. Contemptuous tilt to his head. Predictable. A direct assault. He raised his sword, ready to bisect the charge. But at the last possible second, just as he entered Slade's killing range, Beast Boy's powerful calf muscles coiled and unleashed their force vertically, upward. He launched himself into the air, directly over Slade's head. The mercenary's blade swept through empty space where a torso should have been. In that instant of suspended air, the demon form dissolved in a flash of green light. Slade's systems recalculating and refocusing upward, only to be met, not with a descending attacker, but with a sudden expanding mass. Beast Boy had shifted into a giant squid, not to grapple, but to deploy its natural defense. A thick, vicious cloud of jet-black ink erupted from a cephalopod siphon, spraying directly into Deathstroke's helmet, its substance unnaturally opaque and sticky. It splattered across his crimson lens and sensory ports with a sickening splat, plunging his enhanced visual and thermal feeds into instantaneous, impenetrable darkness. The world of data became a void of black static for the first time since his resurrection, and Deathstroke was truly blind at this time. The world dissolved into a torrent of wind and pain. Blinded by the clinging ink, Slade's sensors screamed with interference. Before he could purge the systems or rely on sonar, the air around him changed. It became a roaring, pressurized cylinder, the unmistakable signature of a speed force vortex. He was trapped in the eye of a now crimson tornado. The blows came not from one direction, but from all sides simultaneously. There were a hailstorm of vibrating super-speed punches and kicks, a barrage so relentless it felt less like an attack and more like the atmosphere itself was turning against him. Thwip, crack, thud, wham, thip, crack, thud, wham, thip, crack, thud, wham. Each impact was a precise, concussive hammer strike against his armor, testing seams, joints, and plating. Servos whined in protest. Warning glyphs flared across his darkened internal HUD, telling him that his chest plate integrity's percentage and left shoulder actuator stress were becoming critical. He was a fortress under siege by a hurricane. His swords, useless in the blinding maelstrom, were a liability. He felt a wrenching vibration on his right, then his left, as impossibly fast hands disarmed him with surgical precision. The familiar weight vanished from his grip, clattering away into the roaring wind. Data. He needed a reset. Clear the sensors, regain spatial awareness. The barrage was punishing, but his trigon-enhanced alloy skeleton and hydraulic musculature absorbed the kinetic punishment. He wasn't breaking, he was being mapped. A cold realization cut through the disorientation. The Flash was probing for structural weaknesses. With a furious roar from his vocoder, Deathstroke activated his boost thrusters at maximum burn. He became a black and orange missile punching vertically upward. Through the top of the sonic tornado, he ripped free of the wind shear, ascending 50 feet into the bloody sky in an instant, putting clean open air between himself and the blinding pummeling storm below. The ink still obscured his lenses, but up here, he could recalibrate. The Flash fist connected with Deathstroke's jaw when he landed like a meteor, finding its target. For one crystalline moment, time seemed to slow. Barry Allen had circled the entire perimeter of Jump City's waterfront to build this velocity. 3.7 miles of accumulated momentum, compressed into a single devastating strike aimed at the one point on Slade's armored body that couldn't be reinforced. The face, his fist vibrating at a frequency designed to shatter carbon titanium alloys, travailed the final 18 inches in a nanosecond. Crack! The sound wasn't loud, it was sharp, brittle, the precise noise of something engineered to be unbreakable finally surrendering to sufficient force. Spiderweb fractures erupted across the crimson lens, spreading outward in concentric rings of collapse. The polished surface, once a flawless window into cold calculation, shattered into a mosaic of glittering shards that caught the hellish light like falling stars, and beneath the mask there was a face. Slade Wilson's features emerged from the wreckage of his disguise like a statue unearthed from centuries of burial. His right eye, freed from the crimson filter, was a pale, piercing blue, the color of winter sky over a battlefield. It held no madness, no cruelty for its own sake, just the cold patience of a predator who had never learned any other way to exist. A thin ribbon of blood escaped the corner of his mouth, tracing a red path down his weathered jaw before dripping into his chest plate. For 3 full seconds, no one moved. The flash hung suspended in the aftermath of his strike, his fist still pressed against the ruined mask, feeling the faint, steady pulse of the man beneath through his super-sensitive fingertips. The distant sounds of battle, explosions, screams, and the shrieks of demonic hellspawn faded to a distant hum. Slade's exposed eye blinked once, twice. It focused on Barry with an expression that was almost appreciative. "Not bad," he said. His voice was different without the mask modulation. Rougher, more human. There was a wariness beneath the cold confidence, the weight of decades spent become the sharpest blade in a world that kept demanding sharper. Not bad at all. Slade's bloody lip curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, more an acknowledgement, the way a master swordsman might nod at a student who had finally, after years of failure, managed to draw first blood in a sparring match. "You think you've won something," he said, his exposed eye locking onto Barry's face with unnerving stillness. "That crack in my armor, the blood on your fist, proves that I can be hurt." He tilted his head slightly, the gesture no longer mediated by a helmet's limited range of motion. His bare face made the motion intimate, almost conversational. But you misunderstand the nature of the trade." Barry's triumph curdled in his chest. He tried to pull back, to break contact and create distance, the speedster's internal refuge, but he couldn't move. His gaze dropped. There, buried to the hilt in his thigh, was one of Slade's secondary blades, a thin serrated dagger designed for maximum tissue tear. It had entered just above the knee, angling upward to sever the primary quadricep tendon while avoiding the femoral artery, a wound calculated to incapacitate, not execute. The hilt vibrated faintly with each panic beat of his heart. "When you move as fast as you do," Slade continued, his tone almost pedagogical, "your greatest weakness is your trajectory." He gave the knife a slow, deliberate quarter turn. Barry's legs buckled. Every hit, every rescue, they all follow a pattern line that got pretty predictable thanks to Giroux's algorithm. The fastest man alive is trapped in the geometry of his own momentum. Blood welled between Barry's fingers as he clutched at the wound. His connection to the speed force flickered, stuttered, not severed but compromised. His leg refused to obey him. The world that had always moved at a manageable blur sharpened into a terrifying, agonizing clarity. "I couldn't use my internal optics to dodge your punch," Slade said, withdrawing the blade with clinical precision. "Ugh." Barry gasped, the sudden release almost worse than the intrusion. "But I didn't need to dodge it. I needed to time it. To calculate the exact nanosecond when your fist would connect, when your molecules would solidify from velocity to impact, when you would be, for one beautiful, vulnerable instance, tangible." He held up the bloody knife, examining its edge with something like satisfaction. "That was the moment I was waiting for. Not to avoid your strike, but to answer it with one of my own." His pale blue eye met Barry's again. "You gave me a busted lip and a broken mask, Flash, but I hit you where it really hurts." He released the blade and let it clatter to the ground. The sound was absurdly loud in the sudden silence. "So," Slade said, wiping the blood from his lip with the back of his gauntlet, "I guess there's no more running." Slade planted his foot on Barry's chest, not crushing, just restraining, enough pressure to communicate his absolute control over the situation. His exposed face still trickling blood from the split lip and the dozens of microfractures. The Flash's barrage had opened in his skin, held an expression of cold satisfaction. "Well," he said, his voice the calm of a storm that had finally spent its fury, It appears our green friend has cut and run. Perhaps he flew away. Perhaps he burrowed into the earth like a frightened animal he's always been. He cast a deliberate sweeping gaze across the ruined plaza. The abandoned sword, the scattered debris, the empty rooftops. Either way, no one is coming to save you now, Flash. The protege abandoned his mentor. The pattern holds true. Barry's breath came in a ragged, shallow gasp. His leg was a screaming nerve of agony. But beneath the pain, beneath the cold pressure of Slade's boot on his sternum, something flickered across his face. His lips bloodless and dry, curved upward. It was a small smile. A tired smile. The smile of a man who had spent his entire career being underestimated. Or, Barry wheezed, maybe, Beast Boy is actually closer than you think. Slade's pale eye narrowed. His enhanced senses swept the perimeter again. Thermal, auditory, seismic, nothing. The rooftops remained empty. The shadows held no shifting green forms. His tactical analysis returned. The same data. Beast Boy had fled. What are you talking about? Slade demanded. His boot pressed harder. There's no one here. Flash's smirk widened. Sometimes, Slade, the real enemy is the one within. Slade's boot remained planted on Barry's chest, his pale blue eye boring into the speedster's defiant smile with mounting suspicion. His tactical system swept the perimeter for the 7th time in as many seconds. Negative. No green energy signatures. No shifting shadows. No vibrations in the debris that suggested burrowing movement. The flea, Barry whispered, his bloody smile widening. You ever try to catch one with your finger, Slade? Damn near impossible. They're too small, and they always end up somewhere you never expected. Slade's expression shifted, not to fear, but to the cold recognition of a miscalculation. His internal diagnostics flared, belated alert, micropressure anomaly, lower, thoracic region, 0.003 psi deviation, insignificant, beneath notice until now. Deep within the chassis of his enhanced armor, in the narrow cavity between cracked chest plating and synthetic musculature, something was moving. It had entered during the chaos of the Flash's assault. A microscopic green speck, lighter than dust, carried into the breach seam by the hurricane force of 1,000 superspeed punches. In his flea form, simply a tiny insect clinging to the inside of Barry's torn sleeve. Waiting, he had done so while Slade was blinded by the ink. And the moment Slade's mask shattered, the moment his jaw went slack from Flash's impact, that speck launched itself across the gap and disappeared into the crack in the mercenary's armor from his bone blades. The wound Beast Boy carved with his bladed arm earlier, and it was still weeping hydraulic fluid. The edges were jagged, unsealed. It was an invitation. Now inside the belly of the beast, Beast Boy began to expand. Flash rode away with every ounce of strength left in his ravaged leg, dragging himself across the bloodied asphalt as Slade's boot released its pressure, not by choice, but by pure paralysis. The mercenary stood frozen, his pale blue eye widening with something it had never displayed in decades of warfare. Not surprise, not calculation, but fear. What? Slade's voice crackled, the modulation flickering as internal systems began reporting catastrophic, incomprehensible data. What have you? The pressure built from within. Not an explosion from outside. Not a blade finding armor seams. Expansion. Something growing in the narrow spaces between his synthetic organs and reinforced skeleton, pushing against boundaries never designed to accommodate life. Slade's fingers spasmed, his swords forgotten. He looked down at his own chest as the cracked plating began to bulge outward with a low, groaning stress of tortured metal. Hydraulic fluid mixed with genuine blood seeping through widening fissures and crimson rivulets. Impossible, he breathed. The word emerged not as contempt but as denial, the final refusal of a man who had reduced the universe to equations, now facing an incalculable variable multiplying within his very own body. Servo cables snapped like outstretched rubber bands. Carbon titanium composite tore like wet paper. The hand gripped the shattered edges of Slade's armor and pulled. A sound escaped Slade, not a scream, not even a grunt of pain. Something older. A recognition of mortality finally remembered after cheating it so many times. His exposed eye remained fixed on the impossible hand emerging from his own chest, as if he could will it away through sheer refusal. Then, the transformation accelerated. Green light erupted from every seam, every crack, every weeping wound in the armor. The Ozaru form imperfectly continued its violent birth. Shoulders broadened beyond the armor's capacity to contain. The chest cavity expanded with the crackling pop of synthetic ribs surrendering. Slade's human form became a silhouette stretched over a mountain's emergence. His jaw opened, but no words emerged. Just a thin final exhalation. The last breath of a man who had spent decades trying to become something more than human, only to be destroyed from within by something apex and primal. Then the containment failed completely. The explosion was not a fire or force, but a form. Armor fragments, thousands of them, from micro shards to entire chest plates, shot outward in a radial bloom of liberated debris. Hydraulic fluid sprayed in black arterial arcs, synthetic muscle tissue shredded beyond function, scattered across the plaza like grotesque confetti. And rising from the wreckage, silhouetted against the crimson sky, stood Beast Boy. Not his human form, and not the Demon Clan Namekian copy, or some prehistoric predator from Earth, but a green Ozaru, modeled after his former team leader's bestial state. Its chest heaved with living breath, its eyes emerald and blazing, held not feral rage, by triumphant consciousness, and his fists, each the size of a wrecking ball, rose to beat against that chest in a thunderous primal rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. The sound echoed across the ruined waterfront, a victory drum of a funeral dirge, a declaration that the boy who had once been dismissed as the team's comic relief had just slain the monster who had terrorized them all. Beneath his massive feet, indistinguishable from the scattered debris of Slade Wilson's final form, lay only fragments, a shattered lens and broken weapon parts, and nothing more. Beast Boy's roar faded into ragged breathing. His massive form shuddered, then began to shrink. Not collapsing, but controlled. Deliberate, he descended through the forms in reverse. Ozaru to gorilla to human. Each transition cleaner than the last. When Garfield Logan finally stood amid the wreckage, he looked down at his own hands. They were just hands now. Green skin, human proportions, finger that had never held a sword or fired a weapon, covered in the synthetic fluid of his downed opponent. Slain opponent. But they had just torn Deathstroke apart from the inside. I told you, he whispered to the scattered debris, his voice cracking. Behind him, Flash pushed himself to his knees, his injured leg dragging. He didn't speak. He just watched his teammates stand amid the ashes of their enemy. So yeah, man, that's the end of that. That's the end of this episode. I thought it was really cool. I like how Beast Boy turned out in this story. You know, I remember someone typed in my comments. He said, you know, Beast Boy doesn't hold back. It's a scary sight. Indeed it is, man. Indeed it is. Y'all forget, man. He could turn into microscopic things. He could turn into bacteria. He could turn into like a flea. He could turn into all type of crazy. He could turn into a swarm of bees. Beast Boy is dangerous, man. All right, and then I introduced Ozaru Beast Boy back in the Teen Titans arc in season 2. I had to bring him back. Still think it's dope. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this episode, man. Be sure you hit the like button, comment, subscribe, all that. And I'll catch y'all the next one. Peace.